Now we are going to the candidates for city council. They are Kenny Coe, Sanford Davidson, and Jim Goodhart. Kenny will begin with his 2-minute opening statement.
Good evening. Name is Kenny Coe, and I'm running for City Council. I'm a business law attorney by day, a planning commissioner by night, late night, community volunteer with the LBHOA, and I helped put on our summer concert series, and a heavily involved husband and father of 3 school-aged kids. The reason I am running for council is to protect the character of our city as defined by our parklands and our homes. Our parklands are sacrosanct and should be open for all to enjoy, and our homes should respect neighborhood compatibility. So my main goals for City Council are, number 1, to protect and restore our parklands, which includes removing encroachments through a fair and reasonable process. Number 2, to ensure measured residential development that respects neighborhood compatibility, which includes view preservation and sizing that is consistent with the neighborhood. I also want to equip our police and fire departments so they can do their job, and want to revitalize Lenape Plaza. As someone who grew up here and returned 20 years later to raise my own family, I have a renewed perspective and appreciation for our city that make me uniquely qualified to serve on council. Things just don't look the same when you're a kid as when you return as an adult. I understand our city's past, having attended Lenape Elementary, Margate, and PV High. I am fully engaged in our city's present, currently serving as a planning commissioner, prior to which I served 4 years on the Traffic Safety Committee, 2 as vice chair, and in my 6 years of service to the city, I have never missed a single meeting. Kind of sad. Lastly, with 3 young kids in our schools, I am invested in and have a vision for our city's future. In sum, our city council needs someone well-rooted in our city's past, actively engaged in our city's present, and fully committed to the good of our city's future. Someone who understands the concerns of both our long-time and our newer residents. I'm humbled to say I have the backing of the entire city council, our city treasurer, Joe Sherwood. It's good to see him doing well. All of my fellow planning commissioners, and many important informed residents such as you here tonight. Please afford me the opportunity to continue my service to the city. Thank you.
Okay, Sanford?
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and everyone who's taken the time to come. My name is Sanford Davidson. I'm a physician, and I'm a very, very proud veteran. I'm also an outsider here, much like Victoria. And I agree with many of the things Victoria has said. When elected, I want to bring a fresh and new and especially transparent government back to PVE. My family and I have lived here for 41 years, charmed by the beauty and tranquility of the city. I am a trustee of the PV Library District, and today I was endorsed by the Sierra Club. I have watched as residents become more and more distrustful of our council. I've coached my 3 children in basically every sport. I believe in honest and fair competition. I'm a professor at UCLA School of Medicine and at the UCLA Jules Stein Eye Institute. Why am I running? Same basic reason as the first reason that Kenny said. The previous sale of deeded parkland by PVE, its most precious possession, was absolutely wrong. I am concerned about a study and a rezoning project regarding urbanization, in quotes, of Malaga Cove Plaza, funded by an insider grant, and the city is and my point is the preservation of Malaga Cove Plaza as it is, and it is in play right now. I believe our present city government tries very hard not to be opened and not to be transparent. I hope to change that. I believe very strongly in neighborhood compatibility and tree compliance. As a proud veteran, I support our police completely and thank them for their service. I am very concerned about the massive proliferation of cell towers, which is the Planning Commission's responsibility. My opponents disagree with me on many of these points. Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you to the League of Women Voters. for hosting this event, and thank you all for coming out. My family and I first moved to Palos Verdes Estates in 1979 because of the unique character and quality of life that we could provide for our children. Aside from my profession in the aerospace industry, I've had the opportunity to serve as a volunteer with many organizations, to include the Peninsula Education Foundation, a member of the city's finance committee at that time, a member of the Planning Commission, a trustee of the Palos Verdes Unified School District, and a member of the City Council for the past 12 years. I have enjoyed my service to our community with my fellow council members. Much has been accomplished beyond the day-to-day business of the city over the past 12 years, including the conversion of the city's Bluff Cove home sites to nearly 6 acres of open space and improvements in the Lanada Bay Plaza in support of the Homeowners Association plan. The city has achieved a balanced budget each year while maintaining a 50% reserve. The city has created the city's disaster district program, providing 6 locations in the city for emergency preparedness teams. The city has maintained roads to keep future costs at a minimum and performed a major repair to the roadway on PV Drive West near Bluff Cove using federal grant money that we were able to obtain. We've maintained and improved the city's storm drain infrastructure and flood control system, which was tested only a few weeks ago. Lastly, developed the first Citizens Academy held this past year for our residents, nearly 20, to familiarize them in municipal operations, budgeting, police and fire services, and environmental programs. The city of Palos Verdes Estates is a very special place to its residents who, like me, move here to raise our families, retire, and enjoy the benefits of our community. I have served these past 12 years and believe my goals of preserving the quality of life while being financially responsible and preserving the beauty of our city have been achieved. If I'm reelected, I will bring continuity and experience to the new council as it deals with the issues facing our city. Thank you. Sorry I went over.
Okay, now we're going on to the questions. And we will start with Sanford. If elected to the city council, what are the highest priority changes you would make?
It's a wonderful question. Number one, I don't think we should make the Lugliani mistake. It was a terrible mistake. Every door I've knocked on, everyone has said they're ashamed of Palos Verdes Estates City Council doing this. Number two, I think one of the statements that Kenny Cow said, which should be remarked upon, that he's approved by all of the members of the City Council, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that the Planning Commission is an incubator for people coming to the City Council. It has been that way forever. I hope to change that. I would not be opposed to planning commissioners being elected because they are simply appointed by the City Council. They incubate, they go through a turnstile, and then they become City Council members. I think that's a terrible, terrible precedent, and it just simply allows the locomotive to keep going forward. Had I not run for this election, everyone would have just walked on. There wouldn't have been any change whatsoever. Thank you.
Jim?
So probably the highest priority of the city right now is passing Measure D. As it was talked about in the treasurer's format, it's a sizable amount of our budget. If it doesn't pass, we'll have to fund it with reserves. The most significant problem with that is when and if we pass it again the following year, there's no way to recover that $4.6 million out of our reserve. So that's probably the highest priority that I would offer. Secondly, I think it's important that the City Council take into consideration the CalPERS pension costs. CalPERS right now is reducing or talking about reducing their discount rate, which is going to significantly increase the cost to the city, and we don't have the money for that, so we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kenny?
The thing that I would want to change is just, it's pretty much general and universal with regards to the approach that the city government takes. We tend to be a very reactive body as opposed to a proactive body. I think the city needs to be more proactive when it comes to a lot of the things that are out there. Just as a case in point, cell towers. we're very reactive to a lot of the cell tower applications that are happening to the city. We get applications and we have to make decisions based on those applications that are tendered to us by the carriers. I want to be able to take that bull by the horns and to be able to develop policy that takes a proactive approach. And to Dr. Davidson's comment about Planning Commission, I'm learned so much just in the past year and a half on the Planning Commission. I actually think Planning Commission is the right training grounds for City Council. So I don't think it's just a coincidence that people from Planning Commission go to City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we will go to Jim for the next question. The City Council works to preserve the rural character and ambiance of Palos Verdes estates. Would you work toward any of the following improvements? New parks, not just parkland, a community center, a playground, a historical museum, or Wi-Fi in the commercial centers? So the floor is yours, Jim.
Thank you. So, as many of you know, in our city, we have what's called passive parks. The reason for that is they're low maintenance. Parks are pretty expensive to maintain. The equipment around the park, the cutting the grass, all of those kinds of things does cost money. And the City Council has been, over the years, not just this council, has been very frugal in that approach. A community center is kind of challenging because we really don't have a lot of open space for people to meet. This building is probably limited, as we can see here. So I don't know that community centers would be a high priority. We have other locations like the library up in the main library would be a good facility. Historical museum, I think the library is a wonderful thing. Mr. Davidson perhaps can be influential in getting a segment of the Malaga Cove Library to house some museum. Wi-Fi, I think it's a great idea for our business center. Dwight Abbott, former mayor and council member, had this idea, and hopefully we can that will come to fruition.
Okay, Kenny?
We're in the 21st century. Wi-Fi is pretty much a given. And especially in a lot of urban communities, you can count on there being Wi-Fi omnipresent. So that is something that I would be willing to explore. It seems like that technology is there. It would be of minimal impact visually to the overall aesthetics of our neighborhood. So that's something I could definitely get behind and wanting to explore. Our parklands is a very sensitive issue, as I think everybody here understands. So to that extent, I wouldn't want to change the general character of our city. But at the same time, we have a younger demographic that is in this area. We have young families with small kids who want playgrounds. I lived in Irvine before coming back to Palos Verdes, and they have parks and playgrounds at every corner, pretty much. I'm not saying that we're going in that direction, but I'd be willing to consider at least some reasonable proposals in that vein. So, thank you.
Sanford?
Thank you. Jim, I hate to say this, but you're the only guy on this dais who voted for the sale of parkland. So that question is easily answered at this dais. As a trustee of the Palos Verdes Library Board, we have so many wonderful activities for our young kids. The city does not have those activities. Therefore, the kids go to the library, and they have a wonderful time there. They have books, they have activities, they have art galleries. Having Wi-Fi is a no-brainer. You have to have Wi-Fi these days. The open space, again, it's also a no-brainer. We have to keep our open space. Parks, difficult answer for PV Estates because you really do not want people coming up from other areas to use our parks so that our residents will not have the availability of that park. Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to the next question, and we will go with Kenny. The question is, are there any circumstances in which you would support Palos Verdes Estates selling or leasing parkland to residents or others?
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Sanford?
I agree with Kenny. The fellow you really have to ask that question to is Jim.
Okay, we're to you, Jim.
Do I get their collective time? So I'm glad you asked. So obviously this is an issue on everybody's mind, and I appreciate that. What's missing, though, is what the city council actually was experiencing at the time of the creation of the four-party agreement. So let me fill you in quickly. For many years, the school district had sought to sell lots C and D. This was in violation of the deed restrictions. The school district sued the Homes Association, saying the deed restrictions no longer applied, and asked the city to rezone those lots, C and D, to R1 residential. The trial court supported the deed restrictions of the Homes Association. However, the school district appealed. During that time, the school district fenced off lots C and D and created an eyesore by parking dilapidated trucks on what they called the new maintenance facility in full view of PV Drive West. If the appeals court found in favor of the school district, lots C and D could be developed as residential properties. I don't get their time? Okay.
Okay, now we're going to go on to the next question. And we're going to start with Sanford. This person likes talking, so I'm going to read their whole thing. Some in Palos Verdes estates want to see the city-owned beach club expand memberships. Others feel that the beach club is already at full capacity. As the city council has the authority to determine both the number of memberships available and the amount of the day use fees, what changes, if any, would you advocate for the beach club?
Thank you.
Sanford.
I had lunch with one of the board of directors of the Beach Club last week, and he presented me this same dilemma. I look at it sort of like the dilemma we have with illegal immigrants. I think that the people that have waited for 10 years to become part of the Beach Club should be able to become part of the Beach Club. I don't think that people should just walk onto the Beach Club just like that when there are people who have been waiting honestly for 10 years to join the Beach Club. Now, there have been measures done to make this simpler. They're lowering day fees. They're doing high-density times allowable to non-members. They're doing, I think, everything they can do short of allowing people to come in without waiting the way they should wait. I think the people that are in there now waited, and they should continue waiting.
Thank you. Kenny?
Okay. Are we switching orders here?
Surprise?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think this is a very, very difficult question, and I wish I knew the concession agreement like the back of my hand, but I can't say I do. I think, it's limited space, it's supply and demand, and I think that the waiting list has been out there for a very long time. As a matter of fact, I make it a habit on my birthday every day to give the manager a call to see how far up I've moved. And it's always, I think 2 years ago, he was delighted to tell me that I had moved up 9 spots. But I think I'm still in the 3 figures, so I got a ways to go. It's just difficult. And I think that they've made their attempts to try to alleviate that demand by instituting that the off-season pass and also expanding the day use pass, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But it's hard, and we have another forum on the 22nd in case people want some more of this action. So come on the 22nd. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
So I'm a member of the Beach Club, and I have often wondered, as a liaison to the Beach Club from the City Council, I understand the difficulties of what is probably the nicest facility in the South Bay. And I'm from Malibu all the way around. It's a remarkable facility. Clearly, there's no question, there's a lot of demand for it. It's a problem for me. I mean, personally, when I see that a lot of people are waiting 10 years and, they want to join because their kids are growing up, and by the time they get in, their kids are too old and have gone to college. So I don't have the answer. I don't think anybody has the answer, but the Beach Club, I think, in their fairness, they have done a good job of trying to open programs so families can use it at alternative times. But it is a challenging problem.
Thank you. Now we're going to go back to Kenny. Will you take decisive action to stop the increasing aircraft and helicopter noise and pollution along our coastal communities?
I live right outside of Rocky Point, so I think I hear the helicopters just as much as anybody else in this community. It's there and then it's gone. I understand the concern of the residents that there does seem to be a bit more of this than there used to be historically. I don't know what the city's discussions with the Federal Aviation Administration has been in the past. I really don't know what the city can do. I know that there are certain distances that the helicopters need to abide by in terms of staying away from homes and the land. But I would absolutely be willing to explore that if it is in fact a concern for the residents.
Okay, Jim, why don't you try answering that?
Thank you. So the city has a volunteer, General Blake Lamar, who sits for the city on the LAX Roundtable. This is a group of people from the representatives from each city in the South Bay who discuss those very issues of what noise and environmental impacts the airport, LAX airport, is making on the peninsula. Blake attends every meeting. He raises objections. I mean, he's a pilot, so he kind of gets it as far as how the airport works and how the aircraft work, and he's done a great job of representing us. We have had some success in diverting the flight paths of the aircraft to a higher altitude over the peninsula or further to the west. Helicopters is a different story. So we have issues with the Coast Guard. We love them. I mean, we need the Coast Guard. Thank them for their service. But they are really noisy helicopters, and they are the ones that go along the coastline. The recreational helicopters, Robinson helicopter out of Torrance, they've tried to direct them further south or further south away from the peninsula, but they like to practice, and the city of Lomita's had a devil of a time with them, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but the city is working it actively. Thank you.
Sanford?
I'm a bit more straightforward than most politicians because I'm not a politician. I've never been a politician, and I will never be a politician. I consider myself a citizen politician, a citizen first and a politician second. I think that having one man doing this job is completely not enough. Just as we had the fiasco with the Lanada Bay Boys, and it hit national attention, and we got the Coastal Commission involved, I think we need to do the same thing here. I think that the City Council needs help, and I see no reason why the Coastal Commission could not play a role in this entire process. Clearly, this involves more the people in that environment, and it's an extraordinarily annoying thing. If anyone has ever stayed on Balboa Island, which is paradise, it's right over John Wayne Airport. So every 5 minutes, you have a jet going over your head. But that is impossible to solve. Thank you.
Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Let's see, this time, let's start with Jim. What do you see as the pros and cons of Palos Verdes Estates having its own police department as opposed to contracting with the LA County Sheriff like the other cities on the Hill do?
I'll give you a great example of the con. Several years ago, one of the other cities actually contacted our city and asked for a cost proposal for our police department to manage the police operations in that city. So to me, that says that we probably have the best and most well-respected police department on the peninsula. We have a small city, 4.5 square miles. They achieve a emergency response rate time of about 2 minutes. The Sheriff's Department, there is no way with their resources out of Lomita Station, off of Narbonne, I think it is, could even come close to that. It's all cons of having Sheriff's Department. I see no pros.
Okay, Sanford?
A survey was recently done of what is important to PV Estates residents. And the most percentage of people responding to that survey was to have a good police department. And I totally agree with that, and I totally respect them. And as a veteran, I really, really, really appreciate their service. Other cities do not have the PV Estates Police Department, and they wish they did, as Jim said. But I would not change anything related to our police department. I've heard threats that if Prop D is not approved, they're going to take money from the police department, which is absolutely not true. But the police department should remain here. It should be doing its job the way it is, and Jim is absolutely correct. It has a 2-minute response time, which really is basically impossible to improve. Thank you.
Kenny?
I think you found the one topic that we're all in agreement upon. So I would just echo what Councilman Goodhart and Dr. Davidson had said. We're talking about a 2 to 3 response minute time, 2 to 3 minute response time. And it's seldom that you find that in any kind of community. And here, the old adage, you get what you pay for, rings true here. We pay 40% of our total operating budget for our police force. 2/3 of our entire operating budget goes to public safety, 40% to police, and 26% to the fire and paramedics. And again, as referenced by Dr. Davidson, Community Satisfaction Survey approves of this. So I would not change anything. I would keep things the way they are as far as our police department goes.
Okay, we're going to the next question. Sanford, you're first this time. Some residents don't want changes in the tenants of Malaga Cove Plaza. Oh, some want and some don't. As there is currently a study underway to explore changes to the mix of tenants in the plaza, what is your view?
My view is that there was complete absence of transparency in this entire process. No one in the city knew about this. Malaga Cove Plaza is probably the most iconic spot in Palos Verdes Estates. I think there is not enough parking. I would love to have a fabulous restaurant there. I would love to have a Whole Foods there. It just ain't gonna happen. There's no parking. The only place for parking in Malaga Cove Plaza is parkland. So then we go to the same problem. What are we gonna do with the parkland if we change the plaza? The city received a grant from someone involved with the city who gave the city the grant. The city gave $5,000 towards this grant, and this is going forward. So if the people of Malaga Cove Plaza and the people of Malaga Cove really care about where they live, they better pay attention, because this city council is not transparent. Thank you.
Okay, Kenny, you're second on this one?
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. Some residents want changes in the tenants of Malaga Cove, others do not. As there is currently a study underway to explore changes to the mix of tenants in the plaza, what is your view?
Okay, I'm not familiar with that study. I would like to know who it's being sponsored by and, of course, what it says. So I think everybody would agree that Malaga Cove Plaza is probably the most iconic place in this city, just in terms of its beauty, its character, architecturally, just aesthetically, all around. So I would not want to do anything that jeopardizes that, first and foremost. whether it makes sense to have the tenants that we do, that we have there now, I'd be willing to listen to people who think that there may be a better mixture. If a restaurant is a possibility, I don't know. I'd like to see what the proposal is. When I was on the traffic safety committee, we actually took it upon ourselves to do a study of parking there. So I'm quite familiar with it, and I know that this is something that's being continually studied by staff. So until I actually see what's in front of me and what's being proposed, I can't really opine either way. But I would want to take a look and consider everything that's being presented.
Jim?
Thank you. So I agree also. Malaga Cove is an iconic area in our city. The interesting consideration is it was designed in 1920-something. They didn't have the kind of cars that we have today. They didn't have the kind of businesses that we have today. So it was clearly a business plaza, much like Lunada Bay. Lunada Bay, several years ago, the Homeowners Association actually did a survey to try to figure out what is the best business for that. Malaga Cove is a different environment for that. So when the opportunity came up to have an impartial study prepared so the City Council and the business owners and the Malaga Cove Homeowners Association could evaluate the recommendations of that study, we thought, this is not a bad idea. It's a reasonable cost. We want our businesses to be successful. No decision has been made about what would go forward with the plaza. We want to see the data, and then we'll make a judgment in public, as we do in all our meetings, and we'll make a decision.
Thank you. Now we go to Kenny for the next question. How do you feel about the NCO Neighborhood Compatibility Ordinance and its ability to protect new construction from obliterating present views, particularly in Lower Malaga Cove?
Okay, I'm intimately familiar with this. I am on the Planning Commission. I have been for 2 years, and I think some may disagree, but I think most would agree that I've been a fierce advocate of view preservation in view-sensitive areas. That not only includes Lower Malaga Cove, but Upper Malaga Cove as well. Neighborhood compatibility. We don't have a view ordinance like we do in other cities. I just heard Rolling Hills just extracted part of their view ordinance. They took view corridor out of their definition as far as what constitutes preservable views. But I think that the neighborhood compatibility ordinance may need to have a second look as far as whether it adequately protects the factors that comprise it. View, massing, and privacy. Those are all nuanced points that I think, I wish I had a lot more time to talk about this, but I see the sign. Yeah.
Thank you. Sanford, your answer?
Yes, thank you. I think the major issue with neighborhood compatibility is the changing demographics of Palos Verdes estates. We have people who have been living here for 60 years with 1,800 square foot homes, and you have people moving here, often nouveau riche, who want to build 10,000 square foot homes. I think both people have their rights. I think that privacy, to me, is the key issue. I think that if a nouveau riche house decides to put their bedroom overlooking someone else's house, it shouldn't be allowed. There has to be some preservation of the person who's been living there for 50 years to have some privacy. Now, that being said, it has to be considered. Before I finish, I just have to point out one thing that Mr. Goodhart said. He did not mention the fact that the Malaga Cove issue is part of a study funded by a grant that was never mentioned. This grant is by one of our traffic people on the traffic committee who gave $22,000 to the City of Palos Verdes Estates to fund this. Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you. So every property in Palos Verdes Estates is unique, and that's why the Neighborhood Compatibility Ordinance was developed. There's no wholesale evaluation of changes to a property. We have a planning commission and city staff that work with applicants to try to figure out the best way to design their house. That's their right, it's their property. And try to mitigate some of the issues with the neighbors. There's a requirement that they do meet with their neighbors and try to resolve those issues in advance. It works 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time. There are a few times when it doesn't, and that's when it gets appealed to the city council, where they'll have multiple iterations with the planning commission. Ultimately, there's a resolution. Most time people go away equally unhappy, which is sad, but the worst part of this whole thing is that they're neighbors, and I think that relationship is damaged. But in the final analysis, view, massing, and privacy are ultimately important to our residents, and the council and the planning commission support that.
Thank you. Okay, now Sanford, new question. What is your position on, there's no on there. Okay. On cell antennas on Palos Verdes Estates properties?
Could you repeat that?
What is your position on cell antennas on Palos Verdes Estates properties?
Thank you. I feel strongly that if people in a neighborhood do not want a cell antenna in their neighborhood, there should not be a cell antenna in that neighborhood. If there are people that couldn't care less about having a cell tower in their neighborhood, God bless them. Let them have a cell tower. As a physician, I am on call. Physicians can get their calls in other ways other than cell towers. Beepers, telephones, there's lots of ways. So the 411 or getting in touch with doctors issue just doesn't hold water. I think that Kenny, again, unfortunately, has played a huge role in the huge proliferation of cell towers. The Planning Commission has voted 12-1, 12-4, 1 against for cell towers. That's just fact. It's there. Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Thanks. We've done it to ourselves, folks. The cell phone, it started out with the little flip phone, and this thing, and now we get live streaming. And live streaming demands different resources from the carriers, the cell carriers. I don't like it. I don't like the towers proliferating, thank you, our neighborhoods. But the fact is, the residents demand some of these services. Not all residents, some of the residents. So how do you be the referee there? I don't have the answer for that. The solution is to try to put these in a position where they're least noticeable, back out of the way, on parkland, rather on right-of-way, and hopefully we'll achieve a reasonable amount of service that will satisfy everybody.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Kenny?
I wish it were as simple as Dr. Davidson says, as it coming down to a neighborhood vote of yes, we want cell towers, or no, we don't want cell towers. I wish we could just disregard federal law and the preemption doctrine and just say, no, we're going to decide that we don't want them. Unfortunately, there's something called the 1996 Telecom Act, and per Section 704 of that law, it allows these telecom carriers compulsory access to the city right-of-way, so long as they pass a two-pronged test. Number one, they need to demonstrate that there's a significant gap in coverage. And number two, they need to demonstrate the least intrusive means of putting these towers up. And this is what we do in the Planning Commission, and why Planning Commission experience is vital to being on the city council. I wish we could just say, no, we don't want those, and just say, we're not gonna have them. But that is not only an effective prohibition, it's an actual prohibition, and we're looking at a lawsuit there.
Okay. We feel that we have to ask you all this question so that you can take your position. Do you support the parcel tax? And we're gonna start with Jim.
I do support the parcel tax. We've talked about that, all the reasons why. So I'm going to take the balance of my time to continue my discussion about Via Panorama. So we talked about the four-party agreement and that the properties at Lot C and D could be developed as residential properties. The great fear of the council at that time was that other properties, these lots of C and D would serve as a precedent for the residential properties going eastward on via Cornell, possibly eliminating the Lenata Bay Little League Field, the Valmonte School site and Little League Field there was at risk, as well as the Malaga Cove School site. So the four-party agreement ended the lawsuit. It ended a citywide restriction on the 12 district-owned properties. The city acquired Lot C and D to preserve as open space. Lot A was preserved to protect existing views with an open space easement, and the school district agreed to never install lights for night games at Palos Verdes High School. The district replaced bleacher seats and a TV tower there without noticing of the city or the residents. Thanks.
Okay, Kenny,
The question is about Measure D, correct?
pardon me?
The question is about Measure D, the fire parcel tax?
Yes.
Okay. I do support it. It's vetted by the Citizens Committee, which met multiple times and looked at least 3 different versions or alternative methods of funding it. I'm not so arrogant as to think that I'm smarter than 13 people that met together multiple times and looked at different methodologies. And also I'm smarter than 87% of the people who voted in 2001 and 2007. I'm just not that arrogant. It also has safeguards. You can cancel it at any time. It's a separately held account. It has third-party auditing and has a sunset provision. I think it's the most financially prudent thing to do for now, and if we find cost savings elsewhere at a different time, then we can deal with it then. But why would you put yourself in an emergency financial situation? Why would you dip into your savings and create that situation by yourself when you have that option of those funds? You look at your own personal finances, right? They talk about a 6-month safety account, right? Why would you cut that by a third deliberately, voluntarily, when you have those funds? If there are cost savings to be made to be found elsewhere, let's find them. But for now, let's pass Measure D.
Thank you, Sanford.
I feel strongly that if we had a different city council, I would vote for this. Against this. The problem is that our city council is unable to find the funds that all the other city councils can find. So if I felt that they could, that's the way I would vote. So I'm going to have to vote yes, because I just don't feel that our present sitting city council will be able to fund this. I would like to do something a little bit different. I am clearly an outsider. Both of these men are insiders. Whatever Kenny says, the Planning Commission is an incubator. It's a turnstile. That's the way PV Estates works. I am willing to raise my hand and say that I will never, ever run for city office higher than PV Estates, and I am asking my comrades here to do the same.
Thank you. All right, this is going to be our last question because we have to do closing statements. Some feel like the trails in our parklands need to be better maintained or even expanded. Others don't like seeing people walking on the trails and advocate for less or only limited public access to the parklands. Where do you stand when it comes to public access to parkland trails and the role of the city in maintaining trails and parklands? And Kenny, we'll start with you.
I think that's a very good question. And I understand the residents' concern about making our trails a mecca for Southern California in general and the types of impacts that will result from that. We need to take a prudent response to this. We have to understand that we're in a new day and age where our city assets are not known just to people within our community. We have the internet. The trails are now broadcasted all over the place. I had friends come from Westchester last weekend and hike in RPV. So the information is readily available, and we need to be able to take reasonable measures and look and see if in fact there is a problem, and if there is a problem with impacts, then we need to decide as a council in an open forum about what the best remedies are to address any of those problems.
Thank you. Jim?
Thanks. The city is very respectful of the open space that we have here. It's many of our residents, including myself when my kids were much younger, we would walk many of the trails. This is why we live here. It's part of the environment. Sadly, though, it's become a destination, and we can't prevent people from walking on public land. They're taxpayers. This is public money. We take money from the state as part of these propositions, and so the trails that are here are available. One thing the city must do is provide for safe access and safety on the trails. There's a problem more recently with bicycles. We've had a couple of residents come to the council meetings and talk about the damage bicycles do. I'm very concerned about that. And we should figure out where bicycles can ride and where they shouldn't. But it's one of the assets of our city, and it's largely for our residents, and that's where we should support them.
Sanford?
I'd like to raise my hand again and ask the fellows sitting to my right and to my left to pledge on tape that they will not run for any office higher than PV Estates.
Would you please answer, quiet please. Would you please answer
Sure.
the question?
I was just endorsed by the Sierra Club. I think everyone should be able to use every trail, period. I am raising my hand to ask my two colleagues here if they will, on tape, swear that they will not run any higher than where we are now. And you can't cut me off this time because I have plenty of time. So I'm asking you. You cannot pledge?
You know, I'll tell you a funny story. When Governor Schwarzenegger, I guess it was Gray Davis.
Okay, so you're saying no. How about
no.
you, Kenny?
I agree. It's a funny story. This
Yeah,
whole
it's a
thing.
funny story.
It's a funny story. What's happening here?
I mean, yeah.
Well,
So
let's
I don't
move
think
on.
it's funny, and let me tell you why. I think that this gentleman right here may very well be using this as a stepping stone. Okay?
What? Why?
Whether
Why?
he says it
What
or
basis do you have? What basis do you have for saying that?
Okay.
You're now making an ad hominem attack against me.
Gentlemen, stop right there. You will not talk to each other while this forum is on. You will answer the questions, and then we will move on to the next question. Now we are going to
Thank
the
you.
closing statements with Jim.
Thank you. 18 years ago, I was elected and served as a member of the Board of Education. I learned that working together with fellow board members and the ability to compromise will result in great accomplishments. The opening of a second high school in our city is but one. Over the last 12 years, the ability to work together with fellow council members has also resulted in many accomplishments, as I have noted. I have enjoyed these past 12 years and know that the decisions made by the council are as important to our residents as those that affect the education of our children. I will continue to be an independent thinker, and with the principles of working together, will achieve what is best for all of our residents. I am running for re-election because there is much work to do. My goals for the next 4 years are to continue to preserve the quality of life in our city. We as residents have come to expect a standard for the quality of our roads, the maintenance and upgrade of our storm drains, and the preservation of our parklands. My objective is to assure that we have the priorities in working with residents to keep the environment we want and improve the way we do it. The city is protected with 50% reserves for unexpected demands on the city. We have to be careful in our spending so that we focus on public safety as a priority. I can commit to a conservative approach to developing the city budget to make sure we have the funds needed to keep the city in great condition. And lastly, to improve public safety for our residents. Our police department has maintained an emergency response time of 2 minutes, as we've discussed, and I will assure that this record is maintained. The city must be prepared in the event of a natural disaster. We've heard about earthquakes. We started preparing 8 years ago for one. Still hasn't come, folks, but it will. The city's disaster district plan is tested each year and works well, and I will assure that the teams in each of the 6 districts are prepared and ready to assist in an emergency. Thank you, and I would appreciate your vote on March 7th.
Sanford?
I hope tonight has helped voters in seeing really the stark differences between me as an outsider, beholden to no one, who hopes to bring back honesty, transparency, and caring to PV Estates, and the political insiders who sit beside me supporting our bloated city government. Let's talk about some common sense actions I would like to implement. Number 1, I'd like to have an ethics committee, comprised of non-government citizens, such as retired or active judges, living in our community to review any questionable actions by both elected and appointed members of our city government. 2, a parkland oversight committee, again comprised of non-government individuals, to ensure that no shenanigans occur as it has with our most precious asset, our parkland. For example, should parkland be used to provide parking for the urbanization of Malacca Cove Plaza? I also recommend a hiring freeze for employees of PV Estates, excluding police, fire, and paramedic services. I believe that this freeze should be temporary, but long enough to have an independent group do a forensic audit of our city's financing and hiring practices. I'd like to begin community forums. Everyone I meet doesn't know anything, where residents can actually meet with city council members in an informal setting without fear of being cut off mid-sentence, which is what's going on right now. I'd like to, and this is very personal, I want to set up a formal city observance of Veterans Day. I think that that day should be done to honor those who sacrificed so much that we may live in a free America. Now, these common sense actions are only a few of the new and fresh ideas for honest, transparent government. A political journalist said, "It isn't bad if people see a shift in decision-making. It isn't bad if the government is on his or her side for a change. In fact, it is unifying. I respectfully ask for your vote on March 7th, so I may unify our city once again. Thank you, and God bless you all."
Kenny?
This is my first foray into quote-unquote politics, and I'm glad that Dr. Davidson sees a bright future for me in politics. It's very uncomfortable for me, actually, to be in this position, because I don't necessarily like my name out there. If you knew me on a personal level, you know that I'm a very private person. I think in the position we're in, it's actually very easy to criticize the past and to make promises about the future. But do your present actions correlate with your promises for the future? And for me, they do. My promises, number 1, was to restore parklands. That's what I have been already doing on the Planning Commission. My second promise was to ensure measured residential development, view preservation, scaling that makes sense per the neighborhood compatibility guidelines. I've already been doing that. That's what I've been doing. So when I make promises of that for the future, it's not just words, they're actual actions. And further to Dr. Davidson's point about my using this as a stepping stone to other public office, we have a city of about 13,000 residents and about 5,000 plus homes. If I'm thinking about higher office, I picked the wrong city to represent, because this is kind of a dead end when it comes to politics. So if Dr. Davidson wants me to raise my hand and do it, I won't do it because he's told me to. But I don't really know where there is to go from here. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's give these candidates a good round of applause.
Thank you.